Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the morning show, Zoom version, broadcasting on Channel 9, as well as Port Media's YouTube channel and Facebook page. I'm your host, Mary Jacobsen, and I'm just delighted that our new customized Zoom technology at Port Media will enable us to inform and entertain you every Thursday morning at 9 a.m. with notable guests on topics of interest. Today, our topic is an important one: mental health during these extraordinarily unusual and deeply challenging times. And I have just the guests today to help us understand better ways to cope. Gary Gastman of Link House and Christine Turner, their Outpatient Services Director, are here. And later in today's show, I'll be speaking with local author and teacher Áine Greaney about an accessible and immediate way to reduce your stress by using expressive writing. But first, let me welcome Link House Executive Director Gary Gastman and Outpatient Services Director Christine Turner, who are here to talk with us about mental health challenges during the pandemic. First of all, welcome Gary and welcome Chris. So happy to have you here.
Mary, thank you for inviting us. Yes, we're happy.
Oh, my pleasure. It's my pleasure. You're just the people I want to talk to you about this topic. So first of all, on a personal level, just how are each of you doing?
Yeah. Chris, do you want to jump in?
How are we doing?
Yeah, just as people, as individuals.
As people, I'm actually doing great. I'm trying to find a balance between baking and exercising. So yeah, I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
How about you, Gary?
I'm doing well. We're kind of getting used to our new normal, and just keep entertained outside of work and keep sane and manage those fears and stress.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, you mentioned exercise, Chris. That's one of my ways of coping. And the difference between how I'm coping now and before is today I actually am going for a walk every day, whereas in the past I just intended to. So I'll take whatever silver lining we can find. Well, I wanted to start, Gary and Chris, if you could just tell us something about the work of Link House, as well as the relatively new Center for Outpatient and Behavioral Health, who you work with, what kind of services you provide, and for each of you, your roles within the organization. So whoever would like to start, maybe Gary, would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just give thank you, Mary. I'll just give a quick overview. So we are a local nonprofit providing substance use services in our local community for the past 49 years. We're one of the oldest nonprofits in the community, and maybe one of the oldest businesses around in the Newburyport area. We have a total of 6 programs. 5 are brick and mortar residential programs where we service adults, both male and female, of 130 beds capacity. So at any given time, we have 130 individuals in our programs. And we have programs located in Amesbury, Newburyport, and Salisbury. And very proud to let the public know that in the past 6 months, we've opened 2 new programs. One brought Chris on board, which we're excited about. And the second is a women's sober house in Newburyport for 17 women. So those are in the past 6 months, which has been great for us. We have 35 dedicated employees that are on the front lines every day, considered to be healthcare workers and trying to keep people safe and alive. We also have a dedicated and robust group of board of directors as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that, Gary. That's such an impressive array of programs, and I'm really glad that your frontline workers are out there. I hope they're staying safe, but it's wonderful that they're.
They are, and it's been a big ordeal for them too, because they're just like you hear about the hospitals and the nursing homes. We're in it just in a similar way, and so they're living it and breathing it every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and with our expansion, we're very fortunate to bring Chris Turner on board as the new director for the Outpatient Center. So very much enjoy having Chris on board, and Chris can talk a little bit about her new center.
Yes, and Chris is a veteran of the morning show when we were just on the radio, and I think of you as a friend of the morning show, and now you are too, Gary. So I know what a gem Chris is from our previous conversation. But Chris, could you tell us something about your role and the work of the new center?
Yeah, thank you, Mary. It's good to be back. Good to see your face. I was hired back in June of last year to help Gary expand the services at Link House to an outpatient center. And by November, we actually opened the doors to clients. We became licensed as a mental health clinic and substance abuse treatment clinic. We have master's level licensed therapists, and we also have a nurse practitioner and a consulting psychiatrist.
Wow.
We can, cover the whole spectrum of assessment, psychopharmacology, medication management, and individual and group counseling and therapy. So yeah, we're up and running, and we've served, I think, approximately 120 clients a month by the time January came around, and continue to expand those numbers even during these times. I think yesterday we had 5 new referrals. So yeah, things are going. Yeah.
I'm not surprised that you're getting new referrals, but I'm really glad that you're there for people. So thanks for that, Chris. Well, as it so happens, we're talking in May, and May is Mental Health Awareness Month, timely enough. And I believe that Link House is in the midst of a public service campaign to acknowledge Mental Health Awareness Month. Could you tell us something about your project?
Sure. Yeah. So we're actually working with a social media consultant, Stacy Markets. I want to give a shout out to who's helping us guide this campaign. And you're right. So May is Mental Health Awareness Month at a national level, and it's a way for the public to become more aware of the needs and services in the community, both for what's out there and what's still, and what that gap might still be. So for us locally, we're doing a few things. We're starting a sticker campaign. And using some of our local friendly businesses such as Auto Pizza and Natural Grocer to put stickers on any outgoing product, any pizza boxes, coffee packaging. So that's great. It's a great way to distribute at a very grassroots level. We're doing a few articles in the Daily News. We're doing an interview with you, and just trying to get the public more aware of some of the needs out there in the community. So
great. That's wonderful. And I happen to live near the Natural Grocer, so I know they're doing thriving takeout, curbside pickup. And I imagine autos as well. So that seems like a great idea. And I'm so glad you're doing it. So, well, I wanted to find out, how has the pandemic in general, and social distancing, of course, in particular, impacted the work of Link House and the Outpatient Center? Whoever would like to begin, either Gary or Chris.
Chris, do you want to jump in first?
Sure. It was the Outpatient Center, I think, as pretty much as soon as we knew this was happening, we switched it up to using the telehealth platform and telephone appointments. So pretty swiftly, we responded to that. And fortunately, most of our patients have been open to having their appointments via telehealth and telephone. So I feel that we're equally as accessible, as we were when we were there in person. It's been a learning curve for us to use the telehealth platform, as it has been for our clients and patients that are using it. So, pretty much through the beginning technical difficulties for everybody.
We all are familiar with those. Anyone who's
people are becoming much more comfortable with it. So,
yeah. I'll just say, Chris, I've been impressed that in 72 hours, you went from in-person offices to telehealth within 3 days, which was amazing. Testament to your directorship.
Not over your technical difficulties in 3 days.
Amazing.
I'm impressed. That's really
I have some people that work with me and for me that are a lot more tech savvy than I am. So a shout out to them for being as efficient as they have been.
There you go. Yeah.
Tech savvy people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just to say a little bit, because people may not be familiar with what it might be like to get counseling via telehealth or Zoom. So I wonder if you could say a little bit more about how that's different, what you're hearing from people, both the clinicians and the clients, about what they like about it, what they may like better than in person, or what some of the challenges are, what they have to get used to, just so people would know what to expect if they seek out counseling these days, because they're going to find telehealth wherever they go.
Yeah. Let me see. I mean, they would get first of all, they'll get a reminder that they have an appointment, through the clinic. We do have a service that reminds them by phone and by text, by leaving a voicemail about what time their appointment is going to be, and that they will get a call with the instructions of how to get online, or become live with their therapist. So, and it's, the whole thing is pretty simple once you get used to it. I think it's very different to be on a screen with somebody than sitting in a room with them, so that interpersonal dynamic obviously is a little different for both the patient and the clinician. I think one of the good things we've seen is that we have a lot less people not showing up for their appointment because
okay.
we have a much better show rate. Not that we had a bad no-show to say that, but I think
somebody's car is breaking down on the way to the appointment.
yeah, that's right. Or missing the bus.
Yeah.
You can't miss the bus to your appointment anymore.
Yeah, that's right. And you get a reminder.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
So that's been one of the positive things. I mean, not everybody is comfortable. Some people have chosen to just do the telephone without the screen time.
Yeah.
Some people prefer it, because they find it much more convenient, and the whole aspect of managing to get transportation to the appointment is eliminated. So, it's eliminated some barriers, I have to say. And I think, Gary, this is fair to say that, we'd thought about starting telehealth prior to this, but not quite as quickly as we jump into it. And I think that we will continue it as part of our services as things return to the new abnormal that we have going on.
The new abnormal, that's a great phrase, Chris.
Yeah.
Well, and I think a good development too has been that insurance companies have made it much easier for outpatient centers, for anyone to bill and get paid for telehealth and Zooming, which is really important.
Yes, they have. I think all of the insurance companies, and we're credentialed with 99.9% of them now, which was a great thing for us.
Wonderful. Congrats on that. That's an undertaking.
That's huge.
So,
yeah, that was an interesting undertaking.
I'm sure.
I have a whole new appreciation for billing now than I ever did before.
I'll bet.
It's actually been interesting at the federal level what they did to remove barriers around HIPAA. Allow organizations like us to provide telehealth and even phone health, because prior to that there were a lot of obviously obstacles in the way of us being able to do that. So for the moment it's been lifted. It'll be interesting to see how long those stay in place before they start to revert back to pre-COVID restrictions like that.
Yeah.
Another thing that's come out of this, which is interesting, and I kind of agree with Chris on this, is that with the telehealth, we work closely with the Áine Hospital, referrals from their psychiatric unit. And there's something called a bridge consultation, whereby a patient that's prior to leaving the hospital is referred to our center. In the past, we may have had to send a therapist over to the site, to the hospital, to a consultation, which is time consuming and maybe not the most effective use of their time. So in this case, we're going to start telehealth bridge consultations so that we can meet the patients prior to them leaving, so they can get a comfort level with who we are and enhance the likelihood that they'll show up for their appointments. So,
that's wonderful. Yeah, that's really
we're actually setting up a meeting with Mo Lord, the director of the psych unit, and her team to talk more about that.
Oh, that's really great. That'll make it easier on people. Absolutely. Well, as we've been saying, these are such challenging times for even the most stoic and unflappable people among us. And I read about a Kaiser Family Foundation poll recently that found that nearly half of Americans report that the coronavirus is harming their mental health in some way. This was a while ago, so I bet it's even more than half now. There's a federal emergency hotline for people in emotional distress that registered more than a 1,000% increase in calls in April compared to last year at the same time. So I wanted to ask you both, what are you seeing as some of the most significant stressors that you hear about, and how are these stressors showing up in people's emotions and behavior?
Sure, sure. Yeah, Mary, it's interesting that you mentioned the Kaiser Family Foundation, because I also saw some of their polls as well and doing a little reading. And it's been great because they've been at the forefront from the beginning in terms of polling in the United States. And you're right. By mid-March, 47% of US adults have reported a negative impact of mental health to their mental health because of COVID in some way, which is 2.5 times greater than the normal population. And we'll talk about prevalency rates a little further in our conversation. And then by mid-April, 72% have responded that their lives have been upended because of the virus in different ways. Yeah, and that's unsettling and amazing at the same time. So the three stressors, and it depends. And actually, these stressors are across the board, whether you're sheltered in place, whether you're in New York City or in Oklahoma. Top stressor is fear of loss of job or fear of loss. We may be a little past that now because, with the Small Business Association and the PPP loans, I think that shakeout has already happened, and people are maybe a little past with knowing where they stand with their jobs, and hopefully feeling somewhat secure. The second stressor is, will I become sick or contract the virus? And that's a big one because there's so many unknowns to that one. It's very intangible. You can't see the virus. You don't know if you're near it or not. So that's the second stressor. The third stressor really is around financial concerns. Will I lose my life savings? And also people watching their retirement accounts balances dwindle, although there's been an uptick since the end of March, which is nice. And then there's a few other, multitude of stressors that are impacting us all. Missing significant events like weddings or birthdays or graduation ceremonies. In this case, even funerals, unfortunately. Yeah, and we as humans respond to stressors in many different ways. And there's a few factors that impact our ability to respond to stress that I think is important mentioning. So the first is just, one's perceived level of social supports. So we value the people around us that can provide support to us. And that's a big one. And I say it's perceived because it's in the eye of the beholder of who they think is their support system, both positive or negative. The second is family constructs. Who are their family composition and who's in their household that's either going to hurt them. The third is factors such as exposure to prior traumatic events, health conditions or mental health issues. And I think the third factor is resiliency. And this is something I like to talk about. It's a construct that is really one's ability to bounce back and adaptable. And those that are able to become adaptable in fluid situations may tend to be stressors a little bit better than someone else. Yeah. And lastly, you were asking about, so the biggest ways stressors are manifested. And these are not in rank order, but I think they're ubiquitous across the country right now. We're seeing a big increase in sleep disturbances, both initiating sleep and sustaining sleep, myself included. People waking up at 2:30 in the morning thinking about what's happening at work or family. Second is somatic complaints or physical ailments such as body tension, body pains, headaches, stomach or GI issues. The third, and I think also important, is temperament towards responding to others. So how are we becoming short-tempered? Are we becoming agitated? Are we becoming easily angered? So how are we reacting to people's requests and responses in times of stress? A fifth is unfortunately an increased consumption of alcohol and other use of drugs. We're seeing an uptick in that, and in this state, the governor considered liquor stores essential businesses, which makes for some reasons. An obvious one is that there's been an increase in anxiety and depressive symptoms for some, either pre-existing and or new symptoms. And lastly, and unfortunately, we're seeing this not just in America, but in other countries, there's been a large uptick in domestic violence.
I have heard about that,
Yeah, something that the World Health Organization is wrestling with now and trying to do some campaigns around. Even, as recently as last week, the Jeannie Geiger Center had their white ribbon breakfast, and their focus, they switched it to focus to be on this new concern around domestic violence during COVID. So
yeah. So those responses run an extensive and very serious gamut. And I wonder, let's go back to the idea of resilience and some of the things that can help people have managed those problematic behaviors or symptoms. Do either of you have any suggestions for people about how they can tap or expand their resilience in order to help them cope?
yeah, Chris, you want to jump in and I'll follow up with you?
Sure. I think that it's important to try and maintain our routines as much as we can. And that everything has kind of been thrown up in the air, figuring out what are my priorities to do in a day, and kind of try to fit that into some kind of a routine at least, so it's not constantly free flowing. They do say that, structure binds anxiety, and with a huge structure that we have, our anxiety tends to be free floating, and we have to, I think, spend more time like actively and purposely putting structure to things, and trying to keep your sleep cycle. Gary, you mentioned, the whole option of sleep, at least trying to attempt to keep a normal sleep cycle, not staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning watching Netflix and all those things that it's tempting to do, and you don't have to get up in the morning.
Don't watch Outbreak.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
That's a huge thing too, actually. So one of the things on my list is like trying not to become a victim of, myth and misinformation. There's anxiety and fear mongering going on out there, and it's how do we make ourselves resilient? You brought that word up to that, and I think that you have to find a trusted source for your information. Try to stick with that trusted source, because there's so much information, and I think we're all trying to do the best that we can and figure out what we need to do, what's real and what's not real. So what is your trusted source for information?
That's so interesting, Chris, that you say that, because one of the things I've also read about is that people report that the news itself is a source of malaise.
Oh, yes.
Because both for the, some of the legitimate news just about the scale of the pandemic and the death toll, which just keeps going up. You see that on the screen. I'm doing this because it's usually on the right hand of the screen, recorded every day. And also, of course, the mixed and contradictory messages about public health policies and will we reopen, when will we reopen, and whether it will be safe to do so. Will we ever go back to normal or a new abnormal, as you said? I do love that phrase. I'm going to use that phrase, Chris. And so one of the things that I had written down to ask you about was how to protect ourselves from falling into what I think of the rabbit hole in the Alice in Wonderland sense.
Yes.
Right.
And so you mentioned already, just picking, I'm on what I would call a news diet.
Yes.
I just limit myself to the amount of news I'll cover, because otherwise I just fall down the rabbit hole myself. So you mentioned finding a credible source, one that you trust, as a strategy, and that makes really good sense to me. Are there other strategies that either of you suggest about how to manage that particular kind of anxiety that the news itself can provoke in us?
I think it's important, and I think we want to promote this today, to reach out and speak to people, reality check your thinking. I think that's one of the things that we do in therapy, reach out before it becomes a crisis hotline call. That's one thing. We're there, and we can respond very quickly, actually, the same day. And just to speak with somebody who can be a source of comfort and reassurance, and reality check the thoughts that are going on in your head. Because, especially I think, we talk about this in the field of addiction treatment. Being alone inside your own head is never a good place to be.
Right.
You
Talk
know,
about anxiety provoking. Yeah, well,
addiction,
Chris.
yeah, addiction thrives in isolation and
Yeah.
disconnection and loneliness, you know, so we encourage people to, you know, do what I've just said, but also do the online AANA meetings, whatever 12-step meeting you might be joined into. But also when you're on those meetings, to make an attempt to participate. Don't just be a passive participant. You know, you can sit and listen to a meeting if you need to, but push yourself a little bit to participate, you know, because that helps you and it helps other people too. So,
in other words,
yeah.
be present. And I wonder if you could say a little, one of my questions to ask you about, because I know with addiction treatment, it's so important to have consistency of care and easy access. So if people are looking for online meetings, do you have suggestions for how they can locate an online meeting to go to?
You can easily Google local AA and NA meetings. It's very accessible. There's also a great online community called the Mighty for people who have co-occurring disorders, which is a lot of, you know, blogging by people who are actually suffering from those disorders and talking about how they're getting through the day-to-day stuff. It's actually kind of a cool website that I've found a lot of, you know, good suggestions. But really, you know, just the age of the computer Google thing is just to connect pretty
Right.
rapidly. Gary,
Right.
I don't know if you
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And at our programs where the clients are a little bit more restricted in their movements, we purchased about 15 to 18 Chromebooks. And so we have the ability now to do, we're actually bringing in presenters in real time to do parenting groups and other types of.
Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah, it's
really
been pretty cool. And you know, there was some technology, you know, we had to increase all our Wi-Fi speeds in order for things to be freezing. But and also just the ability now that things are, we're not restricted to location, we can now reach out at a national level and tap into other resources that weren't available just a few months ago to help support our clients that are in the programs, which has been great. Yeah, a lot of recovery-oriented materials.
That is really great. And I just love the idea of you having the Chromebooks available. What a great service to offer.
Yeah.
So, well, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about asking for help, because clearly there's a lot of people in need now, and probably a lot of people who have never reached out for counseling before. But this pandemic is affecting all of us in all the ways that you described so eloquently previously, Gary. And yet asking for help can be hard for a lot of people. Some people may see it as a weakness. Some people may think, oh, others need it more than I do. I shouldn't take up those resources. So I wanted to ask you both your thoughts about a couple things. One is that how can people gauge when, no, this is really serious. This is a red flag. You know, I need to do something. I need to reach out somehow. So how can you provide some guidelines or ways of thinking for people about when they need to make that assessment for themselves? And then how to reach out and who to reach out to?
Sure. So let me jump in on that first, Chris.
Yeah.
So the two most prevalent areas of mental health that most people experience at the highest level in this country are anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
Get thrown around pejoratively and sometimes without real clinical data behind it. And so from this case, just to give some facts, so in this country, at least 19% of US adults experience some form of anxiety at one incident at least in a given year, and about 7% around depressive symptoms. And I would encourage people, the list is fairly long and I'd rather not take the time to go through the entire list of what anxiety looks like or depression looks like, but I would look at reliable sources such as National Institute of Mental Health or CDC or National Institute of Drug and Alcohol Addiction. These are all well-established sites where people can learn what signs and symptoms are, whether or not someone might be anxious or depressed. And someone could have traits, but not necessarily be diagnosed with those. They may what we call symptomatology. They may have a few characteristics that leads towards some anxiety or depression, and that's normal. especially nowadays. And I think that's important for people to realize, is that we as human beings react to the stressors around us, and everything's been elevated these days. And so it's completely normal for people to feel anxious about themselves, their families, and even have some depressive symptoms, and for some suicidal ideation. And those are also, and that's why they need to reach out if they feel as though they might need help.
So monitor your symptoms, and also you can educate yourself about the symptoms to really pay attention to.
That's correct.
That
Yeah.
you were suggesting.
Yeah. And one thing I like what Chris offers the public is our doors are always open to be a resource for information. You don't have to be a client of ours. You give us a call. We're always here to help. And I know Chris will have coffee with them and sit and chat.
Yes.
By Zoom now, though. By
Right.
Zoom.
Yes.
Coffee
Yes, there
by
you go.
Zoom.
Right. That's right.
There you go.
And then at the end, before we finish, I'm going to make sure that you have the chance to let people know your phone number and how they can reach you. Okay, Chris, did you have anything you wanted to add about how to encourage people to reach out for help, how to feel comfortable doing that? Or
I think, I think you mentioned it, and Gary pretty much covered, the resources, but, there is a stigma to asking for help for some reason, no matter what that is, those of us in recovery consider that a personality defect. I don't know that everybody else does, but, push yourself and reach out for help. And I think those people that are in AA and NA know that, when you're struggling, sometimes that's a good time to reach out to somebody else and help them. Because for some reason it works. When you're feeling bad and you need something, reach out and help somebody else. For some reason that works, but if you're just considering whether you want to, be in therapy or talk to somebody, just give a call. Give a call and talk to one of us and check out what we're offering. But yeah, there's a huge stigma to asking for help, and as a culture, we need to get over that.
Yeah, absolutely, we do.
We need to push through that. Yeah.
Yes, right. And if there's a silver lining to the pandemic and people begin to feel more comfortable asking for help and reaching out and normalizing it, that would be a good outcome, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yes.
I think, can I just say one thing?
Yeah, of course.
It's been a silver lining that I've seen, and it relates to connection, because connection is the opposite to addiction. We mentioned this before when I was on before.
I like that.
I know.
That's excellent. And a lot of other mental health problems too.
But people are connecting from a distance. If somebody walks past my driveway now, they wave, where they never would have before.
Yes.
If I pass somebody walking, they say, "Hi, how are you?"
Yes, that's right. That's
there's this feeling of we're in this together. And
yes, absolutely.
That's a bit of a silver lining that personally I've seen. So
yeah, I've seen that too, Chris, and it is a silver lining. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I was hoping that each of you could tell us a little bit about how you're coping during the pandemic. We know there's a whole lot of baking going on because I haven't been able to find flour for weeks now. At either Shaw's or Market Basket. And there's a lot of Netflix going on, but no Outbreak. Don't watch Outbreak, people. For myself, I find that just walking outside in nature is profoundly healing. And as I said, I actually do it every day rather than intend to. So that's a good thing for me. I've seen lots of online reading lists for the pandemic, entertaining movies during the pandemic. One list that I won't be utilizing is horror movies for the pandemic. But I was curious how are each, because I'm always interested, everybody's doing something that's a little bit different, either more so or just trying something different. What are each of you doing?
Sure. Well, I'm a active person and I have no shortage of ways to keep myself entertained, but I've been doing more so lately. And every morning, just after sunrise, I've been taking my 12-year-old Labradoodle Daisy for a walk in the woods. She's lost weight, I've lost weight.
Oh, those are good outcomes.
She runs the other way now because she's getting over-exercised. I know this is live TV, but I'm going to say it anyway. Spending time fantasizing about how our lives will be improved in January once we have a new president. I am. bike riding 3 times a week has been great. And I've been doing that with some friends while keeping a social distance. It's been a nice way
Wonderful.
we're starting to plant a garden.
Great.
Yeah, I've been trying to spend some quality time with my 17-year-old college-bound daughter, but that's actually where it's not going very well for me. I'm typically getting the response of "Shut up, Dad! Leave me alone, Dad! You're so annoying, Dad!" But I'm going to continue because she's in the house for another 4 months, and I want. My wife likes to hear that I've actually been doing some cleaning and organizing in the house, which has improved my spousal. Yeah. So
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And how about you, Chris?
Yeah, all of those things, Gary. Especially walking in the woods, you know, where there's nobody else. I'm very fortunate to be able to do that. You know, I kind of live out of town, so I can walk out the door and there isn't people around. So that's a real bonus for me. I live on a small farm, so I have animals and they don't understand about social distancing and you know, the fact that I'm getting pretty much closer to them than I was when I was at work. I also had a new grandson born during the pandemic. I have not been able to see yet. So, and a 2-year-old who is his brother. So we do a lot of Facebook, family Facebook every night, and a tour of the farm and an introduction to all of the animals and their names and what they've been doing all day. So that really keeps me sane at the end of the day, is to
wonderful.
reconnect and realize what's important. You know, those connections to family and friends are hugely important to me.
Right. Well, thank you both so much for your wonderful and important and valuable perspectives. And the last thing I want to ask you is tell people how they can find you.
Chris? Yeah.
They can find us by calling 978-834-6583. If you leave a message, we check our messages all day long, so we will probably get back to you the same day, or by email at cbhats@linkhouseinc.com.
Wonderful.
We have a website, right, Gary? Go ahead.
Yes, and so for myself, my office number is 978-462-0787, and I encourage people to reach out whether they're a client or not. You know, I consider part of my role as executive to be a resource to the community, so there's that. And my email address is gastman@linkhouseinc.org, which is and our website is linkhouseinc.org. As simple as it sounds, and there's a lot of information on there about organization.
Yes, full of wonderful information. I've visited a number of times. Well, thank you both so much. It's been wonderful to have you on the launch of the morning show, and I hope you're both friends of the morning show now, and I anticipate and hope you'll come back another time and teach us more. Thank you very much for sharing your perspectives.
Thank you, Mary.
You're very welcome. Thank you. So we're going to transition now and bring in our next guest, who will be Áine Greaney. So let's get Áine out of the waiting room while Gary and Chris.
Well, Mary, tell Áine I said hi. I used to work with Áine when we worked together at Leahy.
She told me that. I don't know. Áine, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Did you hear Gary?
I think I just saw him. Hi, Gary.
He's leaving, but he says hi. So anyway, welcome, Áine. It's so good to, I always do this now, see you.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Hi.
It's great to have you here. Áine is the award-winning author of 5 books, both nonfiction and fiction, and her most recent book, which I love, and she's a friend of the morning show as well. She's been on before, talking about Green Card and other essays. She also teaches writing in locations throughout the North Shore and New England, and she's here today to talk about her latest venture, a way to reduce stress that's accessible and immediate for anyone. All you need is a pen and paper and a wee bit of time. And she calls her virtual Zoom-based seminar Daily Writing for Stress Relief. So Áine, welcome back to the morning show. So good to see you.
Thank you very much, Mary. It's good to be back. How's this sound? Okay.
The sound is perfect, really good. And I love your blue.
Oh, I know. I guess it's Blue Day.
when Gary and Chris were on earlier, we were saying one of the interesting and fun things about the Zoom world we're living in now is you get to see people's bookshelves, their
Wow.
artwork background. So,
For better or worse?
oh, for better and always for interesting. So, Áine, first of all, tell us about what prompted you to offer this new virtual seminar on reducing stress through expressive writing.
Well, it wasn't always virtual, Mary. I've been offering this class or seminar for a while in person, and I have a background in healthcare. In fact, Gary and I worked together for quite a while. So I had offered it to generally that kind of audience, healthcare employee, a new group of interns, group of social workers, to a very general group many years ago out at Northern Essex Community College. It was something that I'm very passionate about and can speak to from my own experience, but also have taken some training and have done some research in. So this spring, before all our realities changed, I was scheduled to offer it on behalf of the North Shore Cancer resource here locally. And, I was supposed to go over to Áine Jacobsen Hospital to their cancer support group. And on behalf of the cancer resource, I was to offer it there. And it was supposed to be the usual, in person, etc. And then, of course, COVID came. So the director of the resource group said, well, could this be offered virtually? And I'll admit I had some trepidations because I'm so used to teaching in person or facilitating programming in person. But we adapted it to an online Zoom style seminar. It's about an hour long, and it worked beautifully. It really worked wonderfully. We had over 20 people. There was very relaxed atmosphere, very collegial atmosphere. People shared, we got to write for a little while. I was really impressed with how well that format worked. And one thing I noticed out of it, I've been teaching for many years, and there's always that student, and sometimes it's been me, who isn't as forthcoming and feels a little shy and just wants to kind of sit there and listen. And I think, bizarrely, the online format made space for that, made room for that student who isn't always jumping into the conversation, but who can sit back and listen and can privately ask questions, either in the Zoom meeting or afterwards by email. So I think it kind of facilitated that type of person.
That's interesting and a good outcome.
Yeah, so I must say it was an adjustment, but I liked that in some ways it honors our diversity of how we all learn or how we all participate in groups. So so now it's kind of been a 3-phase process. I then got asked to offer it as an employee development, kind of an employee wellness to a nonprofit, and I do that this Monday. It's a nonprofit headquartered in Boston, but with offices in Los Angeles and in the UK and in Canada. So let's see how the time difference works.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, let's see how that all works, because what'll be a lunch and learn for the Boston folks will be a break bread and breakfast for the LA. So let's see how that works.
There too.
Yeah, but I think in that case, and it's not the same seminar as for a health support group, obviously, but in that case, I think many employees are just struggling with change right now, all kinds of changes, working from home, children at home, being around the pets all day long. Is my job going to be eliminated? Am I going to be furloughed? Am I going to, downsized?
Well, we have to go back to whatever normal was.
Exactly. We're in a new normal. So I'm delighted to offer it in that capacity, not just as a health support, though it is really health support. It's your own self-care and wellness support. So let's see, it's Monday. It'll be showtime.
Well, good luck with it. I'm confident it'll go well. And tell us a little bit about what happens in the seminars. What do you teach people? When, where, what kind of writing, and for how long?
Yeah, like I say, you know, I was so used to doing this in person, so I have adjusted it to kind of bring out the really salient pieces of it. So basically, I talk about what expressive or emotional writing is. It's not about being a good writer, you know. I think
Yeah.
some of us have had less than positive experiences at school where you get the red pen all over your work, or somebody, you know,
Yeah.
putting in the comma, or this should be a semicolon, not a colon. It's totally not that. It's not about being publishable or a good writer. Now it can be, you know, it can phase into that, but that's a separate, you know, that's a different conversation. You know, it's about writing really for your own self-awareness, your own health, your own venting. Not that any of us need to vent these days. So, you know, I do the why, and then who it's suitable for and who it's not suitable for. And then the how to do it, you know, how to set up a regular practice of writing, you know, that kind of concurs with your daily schedule, and then also your body energy, because, you know, some of us are morning people. That would not be me. And some of us are night people. Some of
Yeah.
us like a lunchtime break in the middle of the day to do something personal versus taking care of business. So I do, you know, how to transition from your regular busy life into this small little gift for you at whatever time of day works for you. And then how to sustain it. You know, I often say it's great to go to the gym on a Sunday morning, back when we used to be able to go to the gym.
Yeah.
Or it's great to take a jog on a Saturday morning. But if that's the only morning you do it, you know, you're going to be so achy by the following Saturday that you've
Right.
almost lost the benefit.
Right.
So, you know,
Lose
it's about
momentum.
developing sustained practice. You know, little and often is always better than the big marathon once a week.
Yeah.
So that's basically what they learn. And then depending on the group, we do some writing, some fairly innocuous writing. And I also introduce learners to, you know, both in the in-person and in the online version. You know, many people think that it's the big, long spiel. You know, you got to sit down there with a big, fancy-looking embossed notebook with
Yeah.
a fountain pen or a quill. You know, that's not so. I have many journals. I have, you know, I always do show and tell with them. You know, and how you can do it even on your phone if that's your speed. There are several online journals. It's about finding what works for you
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah. What works
So
for you?
that's what they learn.
Yeah, I love that phrase, a little gift for yourself. And it becomes more of a regular little gift for yourself. The point you're making is you find a way to do it, a place to do it, a vehicle for doing it that means you do it consistently. Because I'm imagining that's where you get the maximum benefit of stress reduction. Speaking of which, I wanted to ask you, you've mentioned that there have been a lot of studies. I think you mentioned more than 300 clinical
Yeah.
studies that have documented the wellness benefits of writing. So I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about those findings and what you think makes it work.
Well, yeah, there have been over 300 clinical studies, you know, worldwide, in the US, in Canada, in Europe, in Australia, in New Zealand. And, you know, that's a conservative estimate. And they're clinically based studies that look at expressive writing or emotional writing and its health benefits, you know, both its mental health and its physical health benefits for various groups. You know, one fascinating study I read was about women recovering from breast cancer, rural women, who typically, you know, a barrier for that cohort of patients would be transportation or childcare to get to the hospital's cancer support group.
Yeah.
And, you know, that it was just a gift for those women to have something they could do at home on their own time. And the outcomes, you know, they measured these women over 3 months. And the outcomes were good, you know, in terms of depression, medication adherence, optimism, you know, sticking with the writing. And the main benefit, you know, was that I can do this at home without
Yeah.
finding transportation to a hospital that's maybe an hour away or an hour and a half away.
Right.
The original study in the United States was in 1986 headed up by James Pennebaker, who's kind of the godfather, if you will, of this this discipline. And he studied, very young college students who typically are very healthy, physically healthy. Again, 2 cohorts of students. One cohort wrote about very ordinary things like, am I going to the party tonight? What'll I do this weekend? Should I ask him out on a date? Kind of thing. And the other cohort wrote
about your mind at that age.
Exactly. We were all there. Do I really have to be at this lecture at 9 a.m. tomorrow? How can I fudge it? Oh no, I never said that.
Me either.
No, but and then the other cohort of students, and remember these are very young, healthy students, wrote about their deepest emotional event in their lives. Their parental divorce, death of a sibling, other traumas, or just the transition of going to college. And again, they measured health outcomes for the 2 groups of students, and the second group of students had over 40% lower visits to the doctor over
That's
6
impressive.
months.
That's
Yeah.
dramatic. Yeah.
And they would have been visits for your typical college-related stress, anxiety, respiratory, your head colds, your coughs, which we all had when we transitioned into those dorms.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not to mention, what do they call that, where you gain 10 pounds?
Oh, the freshman 10 or 20.
Yeah.
Right.
And then for physical health, there's a great study was done in New Zealand, headed up by a woman. And she and her research group, inflicted, for want of a better words, these tiny little 4-millimeter flesh wounds, just on the inside upper arm of 2 cohorts of patients again. And then they had these uber high definition cameras to measure the healing rates of the wounds among, they had 4 cohorts of patients, and these are all age patients. These weren't young freshmen, college freshmen. And they wanted to daily, track the wound recovery rate, the healing rate of the wounds. And I forget the exact number now, but I want to say that the cohort who had been writing before, up to, and during the wound recovery and had the highest healing rate, over 50% faster.
Very interesting.
The wound, and it was being snapshot at at intervals. And what that study didn't just prove that writing helps our physical recovery, but it also said the timing. So you start again. That's about sustained writing practice. That the cohort of patients who healed 50% faster were patients who had been writing before the wound, and then
interesting.
So there was a continuous habit there that had the highest heal rate. But they're only a few studies.
Yeah, those are fascinating. Yeah. And the part of the moral is do it, and then the other, do it now. Best get started.
Then, there've been there's an article a great article in Time magazine. I read a beautiful piece a few weeks back in the New York Times. TED Talks galore on the benefits of writing. Yeah. Sometimes yoga organizations will also write about it. In fact, one of our major common drugstore chains here in the United States, because I get their coupon, I somehow opened an email a couple of weeks ago offering 30% off, whatever. But lo and behold, here they had a piece on during this stressful time, the benefits of daily journaling.
Oh, how interesting.
And then a click to what you could buy from their store.
Well, Áine, I can't not ask you what you're working on now, because I know you're always writing. So what are you working on now?
Well, I'm working on a few projects, Mary. I'm pottering around with a few essays as usual. I'm doing my journaling in the morning, and then pottering around. And then I was working on a novel for what feels like a long time now. And this is a great time now that I'm home to, I've printed it up chapter by chapter, amazed by how scattered it all is. And I'm doing a cleanup, I'm doing a massive cleanup, as in, deleting a lot of it, pulling the chapters together in a kind of a sequence. I've revisited the plot, so to speak. So I'm editing a big old beast of a novel that's very much in draft form. Whether I don't know when that will all get done. I have no idea.
Well, I love that phrase, a big old beast of a novel. Some of my favorite novels are big old beasts. Middlemarch.
Well, this is a big old beast, let me tell you. And not very organized.
So I hope that as the big old beast takes shape, that we'll just have to have you back on the morning show to tell us how you tame that big old beast. So I had to also ask before we finish, I was talking to Gary and Chris about what they were doing to cope. You're taming the beast, but are you baking, watching Netflix, or movies of questionable merit but great escapist value?
In the beginning, like everybody, I found it hard to adjust, and then I realized that I was very scattered and all over the place and doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I think a lot of people were like that. It was just a new normal to adjust to. And then I decided, okay, what has worked in the past? And what has worked in the past is developing kind of habits. We don't have to remind ourselves to brush our teeth every night. It's a habit. So, I've been trying to get up at the same time, trying to just have a schedule, be at my desk by, 7:30, but most mornings, realistically, it's 8. And even with the writing, to sort of do one part now, the expressive writing now, then go take a walk, go into the novel, go take a walk, and go do the prepare a set of slides for teaching. I really find that since I made it myself a schedule and made those little transitions in between, like walking, which I love to walk, and I'm walking a lot in this season, made my own homemade mask. So it's really about setting up a schedule that you can reasonably stick to. I think you feel a little less lost, and the anxiety is lower with a schedule. And then also with the transition habits in between the parts of your schedule.
Well, Áine, thank you so much for visiting us. It's great to see you.
Indeed.
See you in quote marks.
Thank you so much, Mary. This has been wonderful as usual.
Before you go, though, let people know your website where they can get information about the virtual seminars.
Oh, sure. It's my name. It's www.AINEGREANEY.com. So it's AíneGreaney.com. And that's it. It's under my writing workshops, and lots of info on there. And I've got a little video that explains how it all works and everything. So yeah, I'm having the time of my life.
Wonderful.
Strangely.
I'm glad you are.
All right.
Áine, thank you. I'm sorry. Oh, thank you so much for visiting us. It's been wonderful to have you, and I will very much definitely have you on again when the big beast is ready.
Great.
So
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. It's been wonderful to relaunch the Zoom version of the morning show. We're broadcasting every Thursday at 9 a.m. on Channel 9, and you'll also find us on Port Media's YouTube station and Facebook. And after broadcast, each show will also air on the radio on WJOP FM 96.3 at 8 a.m. tomorrow. This show will be on, and then the following Tuesday at 4 and Wednesday at 3. And each show will also become a podcast available on the SoundCloud. Just click on the cloud icon at www.ncmhub.org and then scroll down to The Morning Show with Mary Jacobsen. I want to thank our behind-the-scenes tech staff, because as we were talking with Chris and Gary, everybody needs tech-savvy staff. So thanks to Tyler Neufeld and Kayla Noble, and to Port Media's Executive Director, Sarah Hayden. So please join us on Channel 9 next week, Thursday at 9 a.m., when I will be privileged to welcome 2 experts On child and family mental health, licensed mental health counselor Kimberly Hutchins and psychologist Dr. Laura Goldberg. They'll be talking about the emotional challenges that children and parents have experienced in response to the pandemic. And I'll also welcome the respected director of Newburyport's Public Montessori School, River Valley Charter's Johnny Lynn Evans, who will be here to discuss the pandemic's educational challenges and opportunities for students, parents, teachers, and schools. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to do this show and to be able to provide you notable guests on interesting and informative topics. So spread the word and share the wisdom. Bye, everybody. See you back on the air next Thursday.